It hasn't been easy for Kingdom Hearts fans. After 4 years of radio silence, cryptic interviews, a cancelled mobile game, damage control screenshots, and having to watch the same studio push out other games, it's been a very tough road for us. I know for myself that I was feeling incredibly cynical about the state of the franchise, because the situation we found ourselves in as fans was something we really hadn't experienced before. News, interviews, and games used to release on a fairly consistent cadence, and even when we didn't have a new game coming out, we would still get updates from Nomura and his team. Turns out I really should have had more faith because of all places I was not expecting Kingdom Hearts 4 at a Nintendo Direct. What was unfortunate for me was that I decided to go to work that day instead of taking time off to watch, so I had to exert a great deal of self-control, and it's safe to say that I couldn't focus for the rest of the day. I combed through the trailer to see what I could find, and I'm sure at this point people have found infinitely more things to speculate on, so if I reference something that I learned from someone else, I'll be sure to give them credit on screen. Also, it's been a minute since I've brushed up on my Union Cross and Dark Road lore, and in preparation for this, I quickly looked back through the story, so I apologize if there are things that I miss. Feel free to let me know if I'm misinterpreting something or if you have a different interpretation. I'd love to hear what you think. So, without further ado, let's dive into this. So the trailer opens up and we see someone in a black coat. Shout out to Demo who pointed out that this is likely Ava. And there are 2 reasons for this. First, the way she's sitting is very similar to what we see in Key back cover. Not only that, but her voice is really similar. Take a listen here.
まあいいけど。でも君みたいにユニオンに縛られない仲間って考え方は間違ってないよ。この世界の構造はとても複雑で、私たちが定義する光と闇を具現化したものは存在しなかった。
While it's a little more breathy, the timbre is very similar. Like everything in this trailer, it's all going to be left up to speculation until we actually get some sort of confirmation. So until things are confirmed in an official capacity, we've got to take things with a grain of salt. The voice in question opens the trailer with, "The structure of this world is incredibly complex. At first, there were no manifestations of what we know as light and darkness, but our arrival brought those concepts with us. The darkness given physical form only after we defined it." What she's admitting here is that the world order of Quadratum now has a way for their darkness to take a definable and tangible form. If we're referencing Kingdom Hearts 1, it's established that Heartless have this primal fear of keyblades. This fear tethers them to consistently pursue whomever is wielding one.
The Heartless have great fear of the keyblade. That's why they'll keep coming after you, no matter what.
Now, I don't think Heartless from the Realm of Light are following these keyblade wielders into Quadratum, but rather that this new form of darkness is following the same rules, regardless if it's reality or unreality. If there's a keyblade nearby, then Heartless will follow, and this is possibly the first time it's happening in this reality. And even if it's not tied to keyblades, it could be a little more simple than that. These are strangers that don't belong in this world, and so as consequence, the world is falling into disarray. But in addition to this, I'm also interpreting a more conceptual meaning. If we're looking back to the concepts that Nomura originally wanted to tackle in Versus 13, then I think this is also a commentary on how morality in Quadratum is much more ambiguous and is reliant on perspective, very much how a lot of things in the real world aren't black and white. If we look back at Versus 13, the very first time it was shown to the world, it opened with the quote, "There is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." There's a lot of Versus 13 DNA in this trailer, and it's going to be really exciting to see what else we'll see in the coming year. Keyblades being in this realm are likely forcing a hardline manifestation of darkness that would otherwise be a little more nuanced and ambiguous, and that's also why I believe the Heartless look nastier this time around. If a world that lives in nuance is being forced to define darkness in a black and white way, then of course the Heartless would manifest as a much more sinister form. As we'll likely see from the characters that show up, along with the Lost Masters being potential antagonists, I believe that Nomura will use this saga as a commentary on how perspective can warp things. When the dark side spawns, you can see that there are all these bubbles of darkness appearing all over the city. These might be manifestations of other dark sides, as we see the initial bubble appear in the middle of the crossing. It's also possible that these could be targets that Sora will have to take out in order to stop darkness from encroaching in Quadratum. You can see the way that these bubbles are damaging the things around them, and you have all these creeping vines spreading out. I could see this being a world event that could randomly occur, where you have tough enemies that spawn, and you have to take out these bubbles for some sort of reward. But that's the FF14 player in me talking. The most likely theory is that these really are just set dressing for the boss fight, but I can dream. We can see here what look like to be triangular pieces of gold floating in the air, and mechanically I could see these being a literal jumping off point for something like flow motion. Of course, Sora also has a grappling hook this time around, so if these are the purpose they serve, I don't think it'll be the only way we get around. If anything, maybe they're just indicators of where Sora can start climbing, similar to yellow paint in other games. If that is the purpose it serves, I think this is an interesting visual language that doesn't break immersion. I missed these at first, but you can see that there are airships in the sky, and these look very reminiscent of the ones in Final Fantasy XV. So despite the very grounded look of this reality, this makes it very apparent that this world isn't too grounded in reality. Calling back to Versus 13, this version of Tokyo is very clearly meant to mirror Nomura's original vision for Insomnia, which is the starting point of FF15 and Versus 13. If we have airships, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of Magitech at play. Maybe they'll call them Gygas to call back to Verum Rex. Speaking of Verum Rex, we see Strelitzia run into someone and she looks pretty surprised to see them. We can't see the person she's looking at, but maybe it's Yuzora. I would also hypothesize that this is possibly Luxord, considering the events that occur in Union Cross. Either way, this does look kind of like a standoff. We then see a man in a purple blazer who's walking along a bridge. He sees the darkness manifesting around him and he smirks. Based on what we've seen in the trailer, it looks like he may actually be walking along the sky bridge right here. Like a lot of people, I'm under the impression that this is Sigurd. Now, Sigurd we know very little about. He appears at the end of Union Cross to meet with Brain, but as far as his motives and who he actually answers to, it's really only speculative. If Missing Link wasn't cancelled, we would have known a lot more about this character, but our knowledge of him really does stop there. We do know that he was revealed to be the one narrating the first trailer. As a refresher, he says, "If this isn't the ending you desire, if it brings you despair, then leave this world for another. Your options are endless. However, if you do leave this world behind, do not expect to return to the one from which you came." And he could be talking to anybody, but it does seem to me that he is warning Sora that the world he returns to is not going to be the same one that he left. Or maybe he is talking to one of the Union leaders, since it's likely it's been hundreds if not thousands of years since they've returned to the Realm of Light. So for now, I'm going to assume that Sigurd is an adversary until stated otherwise. We then see a keyblade wielder with a mask, and a lot of people have speculated online that this is Noctis or Yuzora. And I can see why people are coming to this conclusion, but I don't think that this is them. If anything, this is likely Vali from Dark Road. Now, for those who aren't aware, Vali was a minor character in Dark Road. In that game, he was an upperclassman to Xehanort in Ericus, but was snuffed out when facing off against another classmate named Baldur. That's really where his story ends until he shows up here. He really only has like maybe one line of dialogue, so I'm very surprised to see him here. If a pretty minor character from Dark Road can show up, then I would assume that the other classmates will appear as well. But the thing is, I don't really necessarily know why they would be here. Sora is really in Quadratum because he abused the power of waking, so as consequence, he was blinked out of existence. The characters of Dark Road weren't erased out of consequence, they were simply killed. Now, his party was trying to deliberately upset the Order of Worlds, but Sora, Donald, and Goofy mess with the world order all the time, even if it's not intentional. So I don't really believe that the actions they took back then, while still bad, would be sufficient enough to give such a punishment, not to mention that the concept of reincarnation exists in Kingdom Hearts. In the first trailer, Strelitzia says that Quadratum is a world full of life, but for herself and Sora, it's similar to an afterworld. I don't necessarily interpret afterworld to be equated to an underworld. An underworld would be where someone would go after they die, and we see that with Hercules. But these characters aren't wandering spirits, rather their forms are completely unaffected and they're very much intact. While Strelitzia is a character who did indeed die in Union Cross, I don't think this supports the concept of it being an afterlife. If Quadratum is an afterlife, then wouldn't we see a ton of other characters here? Granted, we haven't seen too much, but I would still think that there would be something else here to indicate that it is an afterlife. If we look back at Union Cross, we do see Luxord taking what we believe to be a data version of Strelitzia and sending them off in a pod to arrive in the far future. Since the previous pods had landed in distant worlds, it's really not out of the question that these pods could have also reached different realms, or even unreality. This is why I believe that the Strelitzia we are seeing is not a real one, but probably her data copy, and that's really compelling. Next, we finally get a good look at Luxord. He's wearing an outfit that's similar to King Regis in Versus 13, and a fun little detail, but you can see on his buttons that there's a phoenix. I'd like to think that these buttons could potentially be some sort of symbolization of rebirth or a second chance. There was rumbling earlier this year about the potential of unions or some semblance of factions being a thing again in Kingdom Hearts 4, and that could very well be a possibility. Because there's all this chaos happening in Quadratum and the Lost Masters very likely being there, it's possible that these are just new iterations of the Union cross factions. The thing is though, I don't really know what purpose they would serve here. Their ultimate goal was to gather as much Lux as possible to eliminate the 13 darknesses, but they don't really need to be reiterated this far in the future, I would think. All the darknesses save for one have been accounted for, so multiple factions to eliminate one darkness would probably be overkill. That being said, if unions are indeed coming back, this phoenix indicates to me that these unions would be named maybe after summons from Final Fantasy. As a side note, I think it would be really cool to see Final Fantasy summons make a proper appearance in Kingdom Hearts, alongside with their Disney mainstays. Now, I say that all 13 darknesses save for one have been accounted for, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to pop back up. So maybe these unions do exist because they have come back in Quadratum and they need to be reprisoned or taken back out. Another thing to consider too is that if there are some sort of factions, they could be Quadratum-based factions. We do see all of these airships, and so maybe these are government branches or branches of military that are either friends of ours or maybe they're foes, but either way, I don't think that adding a phoenix to this button really is just for rule of cool. I think that it really does symbolize something. Another hooded figure is shown, and there's really no indication of who this might be yet. It could be Luxord, the Master of Masters, or someone completely different. And there were black feathers as well that were falling down, and I was seeing a lot of people thinking that this could be Sephiroth, but I don't think that's the case. I found this out from Demo, but apparently this is likely a visual reference for Hugin and Mugen, who were missing Link characters. They were named after Odin's ravens, who in Norse mythology were messengers and were extensions of Odin's consciousness. Now there is an Odin character in Kingdom Hearts. He is in Dark Road, and he is the master of Ericus and Xehanort, and he retired to leave Scala ad Caelum to the two of them to take over. So maybe that character is still around, and so it was a direct tie to those characters. We really don't know right now. But in Missing Link, Hugin and Moonin were supposedly able to use black feathers to possess people. No pun intended, but Missing Link is kind of a black box. So much was kept under wraps before it was canceled about who these characters were going to be, but this seems to confirm that Missing Link story elements will be intermingled with Kingdom Hearts 4 to make up for that game being canceled. Now, one thing that does concern me is that because this game was canceled and there was supposed to be a lot of different lore elements that were in that story, I hope that it's not going to be intermingled too deeply to the point where it causes confusion or certain aspects of how this world works are going to be rushed. Missing Link looked really interesting, and I would really hate for the really important parts of that story to be glossed over for the sake of moving the plot along. So hopefully there's a very tasteful way where these things can get the spotlight that they deserve without it feeling like it's something that was shoehorned in. We get another quick glimpse of Donald and Goofy in the underworld, and this is definitely showing the moment that they run into Hades. This is very unlikely, but it would be really cool to see the flames form a boss arena, which is kind of what it looks like it's doing. And, you know, imagine if you had to play as Donald or Goofy to explore the underworld during this segment rather than it just being delegated to a cutscene. It's kind of fever dream stuff, but they're letting us play as Mickey again, so who knows? We cut to the next shot, and it's none other than Xehanort holding an umbrella over Sora. My guess is that this will be the first time Sora meets him. He'll probably stumble in the rain at a low point near the beginning of the game, only for the umbrella to appear over him before looking back to see Xehanort. This also confirms that Xehanort did actually make a 14th vessel that would be used to enjoy the new world, just like he told Ericus in Dark Road. It also shows that Nomura is hinting at this through his artwork well before this moment. If we look at the anniversary artwork from earlier this year, It shows Xehanort with an umbrella, and he's surrounded by hydrangeas. In Japan, blue hydrangeas symbolize feelings of remorse and forgiveness. I believe that Nomura was using this to hint that Xehanort would appear not as an enemy, but rather as an ally. Now, it's very possible that this isn't some sort of other vessel, but rather Xehanort proper in the afterlife. Unreality is such a compelling mystery to unravel, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about it. Then, we finally see proper gameplay for the first time. Both trailers show slightly different gameplay, but the Nintendo trailer shows the HUD, and we can get a further glimpse into the new build system. The keyblade looks to be an ice hilt going into a lava blade. The impact sprites have these lava flowers and ice throwing stars being thrown out on impact. There's been some heated arguments online that this is a Moana keyblade or an elemental keyblade, but if I'm recalling correctly, I don't think Square has ever shown world-specific keyblades before any worlds have been revealed. So I'm under the impression that this is just a build keyblade. I think it's safe to assume that there's going to be keyblades that allow for new build combos and abilities, similar to keyblade transformations. We've got a new build menu that shows Flowing Edge and Lava Slash, and in this instance, it looks like Lava Slash is being used, and its use gives the situation command Volcanon. There's a new build pop-up, and Lava Slash turns into Igneous Impact. It's possible that this could just be the finisher, but it does look like Igneous Impact is used to summon a mound of cooled lava, and I would assume that this is going to be used to stun enemies. Not only that, but Volcanon is activated, and Sora rides the Keyblade like a skateboard and launches off the mound, doing damage before slamming back down on top of his target and creating an AoE. I wonder if depending on the build ability you use, certain abilities will interact with each other in different ways depending on the context of what you're already executing. The build gauge looks like it doesn't deplete over time, but rather that it only depletes when the attack is being used, and it doesn't look like situation commands affect it whatsoever. We can see that the Keyblade is switched, so the build attacks can be stored for later, just like you can do in Kingdom Hearts 3 with the Keyblade transformations, so I do appreciate that. There's also a build option at the bottom of the command menu, and the left bumper looks to be used to swap between command menus, but I would guess that the build option would allow you to hard select which available build you want to utilize if you have a certain one in mind. Sora can summon golden chains at his side to ride and launch at enemies, and it's possible that he learns this ability from Xehanort, since we've seen him use this magic at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. This kind of confirms to me that he's going to be an ally this time, and Heart Barrage is seen as the situational finisher as well as flanking shift. The right shoulder button will be used to initiate flow motion on these chains before flinging a burst of stars onto a single enemy. We can see that Sora is wearing some sort of earpiece, and if we look back at screenshots from Missing Link, the player character was using something similar to communicate with the real world. This might be a way for other characters to communicate with Sora while he's out and about. For build abilities, we have Chain Raid and Star Ring. And going back to Heart Barrage, it looks like this is what opens that cupboard to unleash a barrage of chains. While this is still a work in progress and I like the spectacle of this, I'm hoping that we'll be given the option to turn off the animated camera shots when finishers like this are being used. And solely it's because I could see that this would get a little tedious over time, especially if you're farming synthesis materials or grinding levels. Probably not egregious, but it just would be really nice to have. Another thing too that shows up very briefly is that you can see that there's indicators for when an enemy is attacking you off screen, and this is going to be so useful for critical runs. We can see that Sora has barrier now, and it does look like this is his default block. I'm curious if we're going to be getting defensive magic like Arrow or Reflect again, or if they're going to bring back tech points. I really want to see tech points again. Another thing is that, to me, the combat looks a little more grounded. While KH3 had incredible combat, I would love for KH4 to have combat that's a little snappier to make the combat feel even better. There's a moment at the end of the trailer where a room gets blown open and there are two people inside. My friend Brett made the connection that these two could very well be cameos of Yoko Shimomura and Kaoru Wada. These are the two main composers for Kingdom Hearts music, and it could just be a coincidence, but if it's true, then that's really neat. People have already done this before, but I went and found the spots in Tokyo where the trailers are taking place. If you compare the trailers with the real world locations, you can really get a sense of how much detail they put into matching the real world. It also really shows how little in terms of location we've actually seen at Quadratum. Most of these scenes and screenshots are really just from this one intersection, and just like the others, the girl in the cloak is sitting on top of the Shibuya Scramble Square building. Now, one thing that's often said online is that these characters are sitting on top of Square Enix's headquarters. And while there are corporate Square Enix offices in this building, this is not the headquarters. That building is actually 10 minutes down the road in Shinjuku. Next to the building though, you can see Shibuya Hikarie, which was the building where the 20th anniversary event and the first time we saw Kingdom Hearts 4 took place. Looking through the ads on display has also been really fun. You can see very clearly the 104 building, and with a fashion ad that looks a lot like Neku from The World Ends With You, at least in terms of the art style and color palette. There's also a Game Station ad that was first shown on the Verum Rex box in Kingdom Hearts 3, an ad for an energy drink, and this view of a mountain range with a picture frame behind it. There's also an ad for a zipper. I actually think that this zipper ad could have been inspired by a dance school that's off the corner of Scramble Square. That school is called Unzip Dance School. As we see more of this world, I'm sure there's going to be other things that people are going to be able to connect to the real world, and I'm really looking forward to making those connections. And that's the new trailer. While this doesn't show too much in the grand scheme of things, it's a massive relief to see that this game is very much alive. I was genuinely worried about something going wrong behind the scenes because Square has never been this silent about Kingdom Hearts since, well, ever. Showing real working gameplay really puts my faith back into the state of this project. While it's been a really long 4 years, I don't really think that we're that far off from a release. I've seen people throwing out that it'll be another 3 or 4 years, but I think that's very unrealistic. Nomura stated in his most recent Xehanort illustration that they were working toward the 25th anniversary of the series, and with this trailer they also reveal that the entire collection is being ported to the current gen. I think we're finally living in a world where we're going to see this game a lot more frequently. We have D23 and Tokyo Game Show coming up, and even if we don't get some sort of release window for those, I'm confident that we'll have new worlds to see. My biggest expectation is to see some sort of release window or year during the Game Awards. And listen, that may sound a little too optimistic, but I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan, so I am very delusional. And if we don't, well, I'm used to wearing the clown shoes already. I've got my hypothesis on what Square may be planning for release, but I'll talk about that in my next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I tried to keep from talking a million miles an hour because that happened in my last recording, and this is actually my second take, but I've just been so excited. I know I've been away for a really long time, and I apologize for not being active. Over the last 3.5 years, I really struggled with a lot of anxiety and feeling overwhelmed with the task of making videos, but Kingdom Hearts 4 has really lit a fire in my chest. It feels really good to be back here making things again. Expect new videos to finally be making their way to this channel, and subscribe if you want to see those. If you want to learn more about the events that led Versus 13 to being an influence on this next saga, check out my video where I discuss the development and internal issues that led to Versus 13 turning into FF15 and ultimately fueling Kingdom Hearts 4. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you soon.